I do not live here, and so therefore I should be treated as a guest, even though I have my own bedroom here.
So I think you got to start it now.
No.
All right, let's go.
Rolling forward, Dr. Sister Science Facts.
Welcome to the Rolling Forward podcast.
I'm Dr. Alicia Rolin.
I'm Dr. Stephanie Rolin.
Oh, maybe I should start because now I'm like stuck with the description part every time. We are two physicians that spend our time doing both clinical care and NIH-funded research.
And my specific area of medicine is psychiatry.
And I'm a pediatrician.
And we often work in the emergency department, and so we're seeing people coming in with a variety of different health conditions.
On this podcast, our goal is to help families break down the news because health news can be really confusing.
And it also just feels like news is coming so fast that we're trying to focus on one issue at a time, go into detail, and give you the facts that you need in order to make the decisions that are right for you and your family.
Rolling forward, Dr. Sister Science Facts.
This week, we're going to talk about weight loss medications.
And I've been really excited for this conversation because this is a newer class of medications. I've really been looking forward to having a conversation with Alicia about these medications, what they do, and why there's so much controversy about them.
I feel like this class of medications has gotten so much media coverage over the past 6 months, a year.
Ozempic. It is literally the hottest drug in the country right now.
You know it by brand names like Ozempic, Rybelsus, and Wegovy, a class of drugs called GLP-1s.
There are even a bunch of new podcasts about Ozempic and some of these other medications.
There's whole podcasts just about these, if that's what you're looking for. But today we're going to stick to our usual format. We're going to start by explaining what these medications are, the concerns that people have had about these medications, namely their cost, issues around access and health equity, and also issues about weight stigma.
So let's get started.
So Alicia, what are these weight loss medications?
They're called GLP-1 inhibitors, if you've ever heard them called that. And they are a medication that mimics a hormone called GLP-1. And essentially it regulates blood sugar and appetite.
And for people who take this medication, it's estimated that they'll lose somewhere between 8 to 15% of their body weight, and that weight loss will be sustained during the time that you take the medication. So for an average weight woman, we're talking about losing up to 25 pounds, and for an average weight man, we're talking about losing 30 pounds. So this is a pretty significant amount of weight.
If anyone's tried to lose weight, even losing 5-10 pounds can be a big commitment. So 25-30 pounds is a large amount of weight.
And that the weight really does stay off, at least for the time that you're on these medications.
And the way that these medications work is that it reduces your appetite. It slows how fast food moves out of your stomach, so you get hungry less fast. And it improves the way that your body manages your sugar.
So that your blood sugar remains in a tighter range, and that also helps prevent weight gain and improves weight loss, and then also has a feedback on your appetite. Now, because of the way that these medications work, it does have some side effects. The most common side effects that people have are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and constipation.
There are some very rare and serious side effects that have been reported affecting pancreas, vision, kidneys, and thyroid, but these are a lot less common.
And it's something that a physician prescribing these medications will often monitor and be on the lookout for.
So GLP-1 inhibitors are a whole class of medications. In the United States, currently there are 3 that are FDA or Food and Drug Administration approved specifically for weight loss. And there are several others that are approved for treatment of type 2 diabetes and for cardiovascular disease. The 3 that are approved for weight loss you've probably heard about in the news. They are Wegovy, which is similar to Ozempic, Zepbound, and I actually don't know how to say this one, Saxena? I clearly don't have TV.
And like Alicia said, Wegovy is actually very similar to Ozempic, which is approved for the treatment of type 2 diabetes, not for weight loss on its own. It's basically dosed and administered on a different schedule for weight loss than it is for type 2 diabetes, but they're essentially the same.
So in addition to being FDA approved for adults, some of these are actually approved for kids.
That's right. There's been a significant increase in the use of these medications for children, with a 600% increase in prescriptions of these drugs between 2020 and 2023.
For weight loss specifically, 2 of those medications are approved for kids 12 and up. And then for treating type 2 diabetes, some medications are approved for children as young as 10.
There's been no unique risks that are identified for children, but there's concern in kids about the longer term use. So there's a difference in starting this medication, say in someone who's 65 versus someone who's 15, when you think about how long they may take this medication for. And Alicia, all of this sounds great, but there's also been a lot of controversy around these medications. So let's dive into what the concerns are.
The biggest concern is cost. The range of cost for these medications is generally about $1,000 a month before your insurance, if it kicks in, rebates or discounts happen.
$1,000 a month is a lot of money.
It's huge. And not all insurances, in fact, most, don't actually cover these medications.
So a big question around insurance coverage has been whether Medicaid covers weight loss drugs. And Medicaid programs actually must cover most FDA-approved drugs for their medically accepted indications. However, weight loss drugs, interestingly, are part of a small group of drugs that can be excluded from coverage. Even though Medicaid typically must cover all FDA-approved medications for their indications, weight loss drugs don't count.
Right now, 13 states currently provide coverage for weight loss medications, and about half of other states are considering maybe approving it in the near future.
A difference about this is that if this medication is for the treatment of type 2 diabetes or cardiovascular disease, then Medicaid will provide coverage. The exception for coverage is specifically around the medications that are for weight loss only.
The other exception is that all medications for the treatment of obesity must be covered for children, but it's really not clear how states are implementing this or actually covering it in practice. So theoretically, kids should be able to have all of these medications prescribed and covered under public insurance, but it's not really certain that that's actually what's happening.
So what I'm hearing here, Alicia, is a trend that has come up in this podcast over and over again, which is that there's a rule about how things are supposed to happen, and then we get into how each state is implementing, understanding the exceptions to that rule, that there ends up being 50 different ways that this is being implemented across the United States. And it sounds like the biggest concern when it comes to Medicaid covering these drugs is simply the cost.
$1,000 a month per person becomes astronomically high. And so by 2023, these weight loss medications accounted for 0.5% of all Medicaid prescriptions, but it was nearly 4% of the gross spending.
Wow. So almost 4% of all Medicaid spending was on these medications specifically.
Some states are rationalizing the cost of these medications by saying that the medical cost associated with obesity is high.
So for example, that if a person is overweight, they may during their lifetime have other complications like cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, diabetes, and complications of those illnesses, and all those costs can really add up. So even though the medication is expensive, by providing it now, allowing for the treatment of obesity through these medications, you won't have the downstream impacts of obesity and the downstream cost of those impacts.
And we've seen that in other areas of medicine. For example, for every $1 you spend on a vaccine, you're saving $3 in future cost, and society saves $10 in future costs. So very cost effective.
In terms of when someone has a vaccine, then they're not going to get the illness and they're not going to have the hospitalization and the complications and everything from it. That totally makes sense. But I think these medications are so expensive that there's concern about what the return is going to be. And there was a recent analysis published this week in JAMA Health Forum that suggests that these medications may not be cost effective because you're paying so much up front that even though you get cost savings on the other side from saving money from complications of diabetes and cardiovascular disease and all of that, you end up spending so much money on the drugs that there's really not enough meaningful cost savings in the future.
So overall, lots of insurances currently don't cover GLP-1 inhibitors. Public insurance may or may not cover, depending on where you live. In a push to make these medications more accessible, the Biden administration actually proposed that Medicaid and Medicare should cover weight loss drugs. And they enacted a policy that's supposed to start in 2026.
But they're no longer in charge. And instead, the person who has been nominated to run the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services is Dr. Oz. We have an episode about him that we put out last week if you want to go back and hear more about what his priorities are coming into that position. And if confirmed, he will be in charge of making decisions about what Medicare and Medicaid will cover. And has he said anything about weight loss drugs?
If his show is anything to go by, he's all about the magic fix, the magic cure, the magic pill that's going to solve obesity.
You may think magic is make-believe, but this little bean has scientists saying they found the magic weight loss cure for every body type.
So it sounds like he is in favor of a magic cure that fixes obesity, which could be, hey, Wegovy.
Dr. Oz has been a vocal proponent of GLP-1 inhibitors, and it is suspected that he will have a favorable view when it comes to these medications being covered.
Which could put him in conflict with the person now leading HHS, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has a platform of making America healthy again. But Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s focus has not been on these medications. It's been about lifestyle changes.
Make America Healthy Again has been based on this idea of improving chronic disease and obesity in America. So this has been a large focus for him. But he has had a really strong anti-weight loss medication stance. He believes that we should focus on healthy eating and lifestyle changes and doesn't think that these medications are the solution to obesity in America.
If we spent about 1/5 of that giving good food, 3 meals a day to every man, woman, and child in our country, we could solve the obesity and diabetes epidemic overnight, a tiny fraction of the cost.
So then this brings us to the next logical question, which is if Dr. Oz, leading CMS, is for these drugs, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., leading HHS, is against them. In order to know what's actually going to happen, what does Elon Musk think?
Elon Musk has personally taken multiple of these medications. He's been very open about taking Ozempic and Mounjaro in the past and has said, quote, "Nothing would do more to improve the health, lifespan, and quality of life for Americans more than making GLP inhibitors super low cost to the public."
In fact, Elon Musk has been so in support of these medications that I think he posted a photo of himself that you showed me after he lost weight on one of these medications, joking that he's the Ozempic Santa.
If you've seen the photo, it looks like he's posing like the Grinch.
Yes, and having lost all of the Santa belly fat, though.
Hence the Grinch.
Musk, who Trump has appointed to advise him on cutting government spending, has struggled with his weight. Here he is back in 2022 on a yacht in Greece. And here he is earlier this month, noticeably thinner. Now we know he has Mounjaro to thank.
So I guess TBD to see what Medicaid and Medicare will do with these medications, but it sounds like there's not entirely agreement between these different players around whether these medications should be covered and whether they should play a role in making America healthy again.
The next big concern that has come up with these medications has been around health equity.
And the equity question really comes up because the health disparities in childhood obesity have been most closely tied to socioeconomic factors. Things like food insecurity, or not having access to healthy foods, or living in a community where you don't have a safe space for physical activity. And because of these disparities, we see that certain racial and ethnic groups are disproportionately impacted by higher rates of childhood obesity. So that Black children and Hispanic children are more likely to be overweight than white children. And that children who are raised in families of lower socioeconomic status are more likely to be overweight than children from higher socioeconomic families.
There's been concern that some of the controversy over whether or not this medication should be covered is because this is a stigmatized disease and because this is a disease that doesn't affect all racial groups equally. In the past, Medicaid and Medicare have covered more expensive drugs without this level of controversy.
A really good example of that is what happened in North Carolina with their Medicaid coverage. In North Carolina, Medicaid spends about $1 billion a year on obesity-related expenses, and they were one of the first states to approve Medicaid coverage of weight loss drugs.
They estimated that approving coverage of GLP-1 inhibitors in North Carolina was going to cost them about $16 million a year. In comparison, they estimate that they spend just under $30 million a year on Dupixent, which is a medication that helps with asthma and eczema. So by far, not the most expensive medication that they cover.
And I never heard any controversy about covering Dupixent before this. And so the fact that they're spending twice as much on Dupixent as they would be on these GLP-1 inhibitors, but all of the controversy is around the GLP-1 inhibitors, I think is really interesting. And the person who was secretary of the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services at this time said, this is a quote from him, "It is my experience that the only time we seem to really get up in arms as a society about the cost of a drug, to the point where we are willing to not cover it, is when it is for some sort of stigmatized disease." And that's the concern that has come up over some of this pushback around these medications, is that it might be about the stigmatization and equity.
There's also concern about equity in the distribution of this medication. There's been a lot of celebrities that are open about their use of weight loss medications. And when it costs $1,000 a month, it is not accessible to everybody. And so there's concern that will this disparity in medication access really exacerbate the health equity gap in obesity treatment that we're already seeing.
That's right. Where children from wealthier families who experience childhood obesity at lower rates will be the only ones who are able to afford this medication. And so that we're going to see a gap in obesity widen, and that we're going to see a worsening disparity by only some families being able to access this medication and some children being able to receive treatment. And another concern that's really come up around these medications are concerns about weight stigma. What weight stigma is are negative attitudes, stereotypes, and discriminations that exist and are directed towards individuals based on their body weight and based on their size.
There's these misconceptions about obesity that even RFK Jr. is saying, that believing that obesity is always caused by personal laziness or poor diet, and that it's people making bad choices.
So we really blame people for being overweight, for being obese, as opposed to having an understanding that it's a medical condition. And something that's really damaging about this is that people who are overweight tend to receive worse healthcare from physicians as well, because physicians, nurses, the medical system has an ingrained weight bias and weight stigma. Even though evidence overall doesn't support this, being a healthy weight or overweight is actually better for you than being underweight. Being underweight carries some of the most health risks.
I'm worried about the perpetuation of thinness in the media, and we're seeing all these celebrities come out saying that they're using weight loss medications to achieve their ideal body weight, and that we're continuously showing that thin is better. We're idealizing an underweight body type, which is not healthy, which is not what's medically indicated, and is perpetuating this negative weight stigma and unconscious bias that people have towards people that are overweight.
By placing the focus on weight, the number, and size over health, and that the availability of these weight loss medications, especially the availability of weight loss medications to children, suggests weight loss over the promotion of health.
In fact, for younger kids, weight loss is typically not encouraged by medical providers. Instead, they recommend maintaining the same weight or slowing the rate of weight gain so that as kids grow, they can grow into their weight.
And that's something that makes weight really different in kids than adults. Adults aren't growing anymore, but kids are. They're still gaining a lot of height. And so the focus should really be on health promotion and healthy habits, not just weight in kids. And like Alicia said, weight loss typically isn't the goal. So that's our episode about weight loss drugs, what they are, and then what some of the concerns about them are.
We've been seeing a rising cost of these medications over the past few years as they become more popular, more prescribed. And there's concern about how much it would cost the government if public insurances were to cover them.
And given the split of opinions between Dr. Oz, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and Elon Musk, it'll be interesting to see what happens with public insurance coverage of these medications in the next few years.
And we'll bring you the updates as they happen.
Rolling forward, Dr. Sister Science Facts.
This is the Rolin Forward podcast. Thank you for tuning in.
I'm Dr. Alicia Rolin.
I'm Dr. Stephanie Rolin.
You can always reach out to us at Rolin Forward Show, ROLIN Forward Show @gmail.com.
Or find us on the socials. We're on X, Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram. Send us an email or slide into our DMs.
Let us know things that you're worried about, things that you're thinking about, things that you want us to cover.
And thank you for your time today.
See you next time.
Take care.
Rolling forward, Dr. Sister Science Facts.
We switched seats.
I know, this is really weird. I want to be in that seat, but you were sitting there first.
Oh, it's because it's got a better Zoom background and I had a meeting this morning.
Okay, well, it's because you live here and you had first dibs, and that's unfair.